In 1889, a woman rode through Indian territory with a price on her head and secrets that could destroy powerful men. They called her Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. But her real story was so dangerous, so utterly defiant, that someone made sure she would never tell it. This isn't just a tale, it's a whisper from history, a narrative they tried to bury forever. Myra Maybelle Shirley was born in 1848 on a prosperous farm in Missouri. The Civil War wasn't just a distant rumble for the Shirleys. It was a storm that ripped through their lives. Her father, a man of strong Confederate sympathies, owned a tavern that doubled as a safe house, a clandestine hub where whispers of rebellion and defiance were as common as the clinking of glasses for Confederate guerrillas. Then, the unthinkable happened. When Union patrols torched Carthage, Missouri, imagine the horror as 11-year-old Belle watched her older brother, Bud, shot down in the street. That moment didn't just break her, it forged her. It instilled a deep-seated hatred of authority and a fierce, unyielding independence. While other girls her age were learning the delicate art of embroidery, Belle was mastering the much deadlier skill of shooting a Colt revolver with either hand. By 15, she wasn't just good. She could outride most men and, let's be honest, probably outdrink half of them too, already defying the rigid gender norms of her era. For Belle, the war never truly ended. It just changed uniforms, changed battlefields. In 1864, as the South crumbled, her family fled to Texas, seeking refuge but finding only more unrest. It was there, at a cousin's wedding, that she met Jesse James and Cole Younger. These weren't the mythic figures of legend yet. They were just hungry, angry young men, scarred by war and ready to take what they felt was owed to them. They taught her a brutal lesson. Banks and railroads, the symbols of burgeoning industrial power, were the real thieves preying on the common folk. Belle listened, she learned, and she made a choice. If society had no place for a woman like her, a woman who refused to be confined by expectations, then she'd carve out her own. In 1866, she married Jim Reed, a man whose charm was as dangerous as his reputation. He was a charismatic outlaw, a known horse thief and murderer, with a smile that promised tomorrow would never come, and a price on his head that just seemed to make him more alluring. Together, they became a force to be reckoned with, riding through Arkansas and Oklahoma, robbing stagecoaches and rustling cattle. Belle wasn't just a silent partner, she was an active participant. She'd ride side saddle, elegant in her silk dresses, a loaded revolver hidden beneath her petticoats, ready for anything. This was a woman who embraced the gun over the gown, a stark rejection of conventional femininity. She even gave birth to their daughter, Pearl, in a rough dugout, literally while federal marshals were circling the hills, hunting her husband. When Jim was gunned down in 1874, a violent end that was almost inevitable for a man like him, Belle didn't weep. She didn't crumble. Instead, she sold what little they had, packed Pearl into a wagon, and vanished into the vast, lawless expanse of the Indian nations. That's where the legend, the true legend of the Bandit Queen, really begins to take shape. Indian territory wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind, a wild frontier where the only law that truly mattered was the one you could enforce with a gun. Belle bought a strategic bend in the Canadian River, a place she called Younger's Bend. Here, she built a sturdy log house that quickly became the preferred sanctuary, the unofficial headquarters, for every outlaw worth their salt, from Texas to Kansas, including members of the infamous James Younger gang. Her next move? Marrying Sam Starr, a Cherokee horse thief from a prominent, if notorious, family. His family, by the way, hated her on sight. And why? Not because she was white, but because she was unapologetically, fiercely herself. She refused to obey. Belle, of course, just laughed. She wore men's trousers when it suited her, a scandalous act for a woman of her time, and always kept 2 Colt .45s crossed on her hips, her preferred tools of persuasion. She wasn't just for show either. Stories say she could hit a playing card at 20 paces and outcuss any mule skinner in the territory. The dime novels, those sensational pulp fiction stories of the day, dubbed her the Bandit Queen. She might have hated the nickname, but she certainly didn't mind cashing the checks that came with the notoriety. For 8 long years, Belle ran perhaps the most efficient stolen horse operation west of the Mississippi. She was a master manipulator, paying off corrupt deputies, outwitting federal marshals, and once, famously, selling the same herd of cattle to 3 different buyers in the same week. She was brilliant, audacious, and utterly fearless. When the law finally caught up with her in 1883, it wasn't a dramatic shootout, but a calculated move. She strolled into federal court in Fort Smith, presided over by the infamous hanging judge Isaac Parker, wearing a black velvet riding habit, and pleaded guilty with such disarming charm that the judge surprisingly reduced her sentence from a potential 5 years to a mere 9 months. She served that time not by breaking, but by reading Shakespeare and, perhaps more tellingly, teaching her daughter Pearl how to pick locks, a true mother's lesson, outlaw style. Upon her release, she rode straight back to Younger's Bend, rebuilt her ranch, and sent a clear message to the underworld. Business was open again. Tragedy, as it often does, struck again in 1886, when Sam Starr was killed in a gunfight with Deputy Frank West. Belle buried him on the hill overlooking the river, a stoic figure, and didn't bother to mourn publicly. She had bigger problems, bigger battles to fight. The world around her was changing rapidly. Railroads were pushing their way north, carving through the land, and settlers were fencing off the open range. The wild, untamed country that had always sheltered her, that had defined her, was slowly, inexorably disappearing. Worse, her own children, the very people she'd fought to protect, were turning against her. Pearl, her daughter, craved a life of respectability, a stark contrast to her mother's outlaw existence, and her son, Ed Reed, a young man steeped in bitterness and resentment, openly sought revenge for every beating she'd ever given him, every perceived slight. Belle, ever the pragmatist, responded the only way she knew how. She bought more guns, kept her secrets even closer, and doubled down on her defiant way of life. Then, on a cold, unforgiving morning, February 3rd, 1889, someone waited. Waited in the frozen mud outside her gate, hidden from view. As Belle rode home from visiting neighbors, perhaps humming a tune, perhaps lost in thought, a shotgun blast ripped through the quiet. It knocked her from her saddle, a brutal, sudden end. The second barrel, fired at close range, finished the job. She died at 41 years old, face down in the red clay she'd fought so fiercely to own. The killer took nothing from her body, no valuables, no trinkets. They took only her life, and with it, all the dangerous, untold stories she carried. 2 men in particular had compelling motives, motives that still echo through the dusty annals of history. Edgar Watson, a tenant farmer she'd threatened to expose for a murder of his own, fled the territory mere hours after her death. A convenient, perhaps too convenient escape. And then there was her son, Ed Reed. Drunk, bitter, and filled with a simmering rage, he openly bragged in a saloon that he'd finally paid her back. A grand jury did indict Watson, but as so often happens in these wild frontier tales, witnesses vanished, memories conveniently faded, and the case, like so many others, simply collapsed. Ed was never formally charged, leaving a chilling cloud of suspicion hanging over his name. The file, officially, remains open. The evidence, however, has long since rotted away, much like the memories of the witnesses. Nobody talks much about Belle Starr anymore around Eufaula. The river changed course, the house fell in, swallowed by time and neglect. But on still nights when the wind whispers through the trees, locals swear you can still hear the faint thud of hooves on the old road and a woman's defiant laugh that doesn't care whether you believe her or not. Belle Starr lived 41 years, every single one of them a defiant slap in the face of every rule set for women in her era. She chose the gun over respectability, outlaws over so-called civilization, proving that a woman could be just as fierce, just as dangerous, as any man. But someone, some shadowy figure, wanted the Bandit Queen silenced forever. And they succeeded where countless lawmen had failed. The question remains haunting and unresolved. Who feared Belle Starr's secrets enough to murder her in cold blood? And what dark truths did she carry that were worth killing for? If this story, this glimpse into a forgotten legend, made you rethink everything you thought you knew about the Wild West, then hit that like button and consider subscribing for more forgotten histories that refuse to stay buried. And drop a comment below. Do you think Watson pulled the trigger, or did her own son finish what the untamed frontier started?